Good morning, everyone. I'd like to officially call the MetroPlan Orlando Board meeting of September 13th, 2023 to order. At this time, I'm asking everyone to please silence your phone so we don't have any interruptions. In addition, I'm asking everyone to speak directly into the mic. We all know we're all seasoned by now to push the button so that everyone can hear and so that the records can be accurate. We have two opportunities for public comment. Public comment on action items are at the beginning of the meeting, and public comments in a general nature are near the end of the meeting. Anyone attending today's meeting in person and who wishes to make a public comment is asked to complete a speaker card. They are available at the receptionist desk and on the table near the door. Cards should be given to Miss Lisa, I believe, or Miss Rachel. Members of the public who are attending online and wish to make a comment, fill out an electronic speaker card. I'm going to ask our good friend, Commissioner Delary, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We all have a lot to be thankful for, especially this month. Thinking back with many years on September 9/11, please keep that in your hearts when we repeat. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Delary. It's great to see him as he's filling in today for Seminole County. I want to move on to the chair's comments. MPOAC. The MPOAC Executive Committee met on July 27th. The MPOAC Governing Board also met on the same day. We approved the April 27th meeting minutes. We approved the PL funding formula as recommended by the executive directors. We had a discussion led by Chair Vanessa Bond from Sarasota Manatee, MPO, on her resignation from the governing board. We elected new officers for the remainder of 2023 and for the full calendar year of 2024. I was elected as chair of the MPOAC. Escambia County Commissioner Robert Bender of the Florida Alabama TPO was elected vice chair. Palm Beach Gardens Mayor Chelsea Reed of the Palm Beach TPA was elected as the at-large member. We heard a presentation on cybersecurity from Emilio Salabadia from Cyber Florida. We heard agency reports from FDOT and Federal Highway. We heard a presentation from Brian Watts of FDOT on the Resiliency Action Plan and Carbon Reduction Strategy. We received the Executive Director's Report. The next MPOAC meeting will be held October 27th at the Sun Tracks facility in Polk County. Central Florida Commuter Rail. At this time, we're going to have Commissioner Janer with her updates, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The CFCRC met on July 27th, 2023. All board members were in attendance. The only action item was the approval of the May 25th meeting minutes. The board received updates on the system from the advisory boards as well as the transportation agency. Sunrail surpassed 1 million riders this year, which was the first time since pre-pandemic. So that's good. Ridership continues to increase year over year. Sunrail partnered with both the Central Florida Zoo and Osceola County Library to increase ridership. The board received an update regarding the construction of Phase 2 North. The system is expected to be open by mid-2024. We're looking forward to that as well. There were 3 presentations to the board, including one on the Sunshine Corridor, the transition, and on transit-oriented development, which was excellent. It shows the addition of what Sunrail has meant to development in and around the stations. It is estimated that there has been an increase in property values of $2.4 billion around the 16 stations. That completes my report, Madam Chair. Thank you. Oh, also, I'll take that as an opportunity as a reminder that our Osceola County, State of the County is tomorrow at Osceola Heritage Park. Hope to see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Janer. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Janer? Seeing none, I also just any questions or comments on MPOAC? Fantastic. Seeing none, we're going to move forward to our TDLCB. Commissioner Castano has her comments. Commissioner Castano, you're recognized.
The TLC met Thursday, August 10th. Our only action item was approved on May 11 TDLCV meeting minutes. I'm sorry, in the TDLBC meetings. We received two presentations, an update from our community transportation coordinator, access links, and a presentation and introduction to the new paratransit provider, Trading. This presentation is a resolution in support of October 15, which is a Blind American Equality Day. I look forward to the board's support, and I also encourage each of your representatives, counties, commissioners, and city governments to adopt similar resolutions to raise awareness of this day and the many contributions made throughout our communities by people with living disabilities, and in particular, those living with low vision and blindness. The next TDLCV meeting is November 9th and will begin with our annual public meeting at 10 a.m. Upon conclusion, the TDLCB will hold its final meeting for the year. This concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Castano. I encourage if anyone's able to attend the TDLC annual meeting, it's a great opportunity to hear from the residents about good things and bad things when it comes to access link. Any questions or comments for Commissioner Castano? Seeing none, thank you, Commissioner Castano. Just also wanted to take a note, Hispanic Heritage Month is September 15th through October 15th. I am honored to be serving as a panelist on October 4th for a moderated panel discussion to commemorate Hispanic Heritage Month, which is a COMTO, Central Florida and Latinos in Transit, have joined together to co-host this event. The session will delve into special topics, including career challenges and opportunities and the importance of mentorships within the Hispanic community. If you guys are able to join us, it will be fantastic. I'm sure Gary will get the information out. At this point, I want to recognize Mr. Wilson for this month's safety moment impaired driving.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Yes, so August into September is NHTSA's Drive Sober or Get Pulled Over campaign. So focusing once again on the safer people component of our safe system approach. I thought I'd share a little bit of data first before we get into the key message. That similar to with distracted driving, we're seeing overall reductions even in impaired driving when we look at fatal and serious combined. But when we look at just the fatal only crashes for impaired, we're up again as we were with distraction. Also be interested to look at how we compare around the state. So this is the percent of fatal and serious injury crashes that involve impairment. You can see we're kind of in the middle of the pack there at 7.4%. Miami-Dade with the lowest share at 5.3%, and then Jacksonville up at the top. There may be some discrepancies having to do with some areas have a more rural component to them, to their metro areas. And we're going to delve deeper into that data to try to get a better understanding of those differences. And then also, how has the trend changed? We've dropped about 6%, as I showed in the prior slide. You can see Miami-Dade dropping 20% from pre-COVID to post-COVID. And then again, the Panhandle metro areas showing significant increases. And then lastly, our key takeaway when it comes to impaired driving, that it's not just about being extremely intoxicated, but even just being slightly buzzed can have a profound impact. If you recall back to my first safety message about speed, how a small difference in speed can make a big difference at impact. Well, the same goes with reaction time. Imagine an additional half second of reaction time at 45 miles per hour, for example. And that makes a big difference at impact.
How do you know when you've made the right decision? It's the feeling you get in your gut, the one that tells you what's right or wrong. It's the one that says, sure, I can have a drink, or the feeling that says, okay, I've been drinking, now what? It's the voice inside you that says, I'm buzzed, Better leave the car when it's time to go. Plan ahead. Catch a sober ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
And that concludes my safety moment this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Quick question before you leave. Do we know what's attributed to the huge decrease with Miami-Dade on those fatality crashes?
We do not, but that's definitely something we want to look into, so we can try to see what are the differences between our areas, so we can
They have so much
perhaps learn
traffic,
from.
you can't move. Yeah.
And so looking at speed and how that relates to impaired driving is an important.
Also, is it possible to receive these videos so we can share these within our community and on our newsletters?
Certainly.
Fantastic. I'm sure some of you would appreciate that. So I would. So Gary, if you can. Yes. Oh, Mr. Good.
The percent increases. What period over what period?
From the two years prior to COVID, 18 and 19 to 21 and 20. So, a lot of things have changed, obviously, pre and post COVID. So that's what we've been looking at for a lot of our data.
So 21 and 22 are 23 is not included.
Correct.
So, and it's percent of what? Percent of total road miles driven
So that's percent
or percent of population?
That's percent change in impaired driving, fatal and serious crashes. So the change in
So
the
you
number.
take somebody that
Yeah.
died and decide, and then the question is, were they impaired or not? So it's a percentage of people who died that are impaired.
It's the percent change in the number of crashes in which someone was killed or seriously injured and impairment was a factor in the crash, according to the police crash report.
Do we know why it matters? Is this something that's a natural progression in impairment because of cell phones or something, or is it something induced by COVID, or is it a statistical anomaly because nobody was driving for a couple of years except people driving really fast? You had no?
We
You
don't
guys
know.
are the
We
DOT.
don't know. And so this is a starting point
Okay.
for further
Right, okay,
study.
interesting, I think it's fascinating.
Commissioner Delarey. Okay, Commissioner Delarey.
Thank you, Madam
I
Chair.
think COVID caused it.
Quick question. Good information, but can you share the numbers based on age groups? Because it'd be nice to see if it's the newer drivers, is it the older drivers? Where are they in the age groups? I think that could also help us not just identify, but also help us to identify how to prevent it.
Certainly. I don't have that information offhand, but we could certainly.
Fantastic. I
Delve into
guess
that, yes.
there's a question of just more data and information you can share. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I want to go ahead and recognize our Executive Director, Gary Hutman, for his announcements.
Good morning, board members. Starting off, I want to recognize a special guest who may have snuck in a little bit. Rusty Roberts from the Florida Transportation Commission has joined us this morning. So welcome and thanks for being here. And we have a list of alternates with us this morning, and I want to recognize each of them. First off, we have Commissioner Sheehan, who is here virtually, representing the city of Orlando in place of Mayor Dyer. We have Commissioner Delarey here, representing Seminole County, and he is here in place of Commissioner Lockhart. And we also have Mr. Ralph Martinez, who is here for the first time. And Mr. Martinez is an alternate for the Central Florida Expressway Authority in place of Commissioner Arrington. And then finally, Secretary Tyler was not available this morning, so Lorene Bobo is here representing the department. So thank you all for taking the time to join us this morning. I want to remind the board that Mobility Week is scheduled for October 27th through November 4th. Virginia Whittington and Sarah Larson of our staff are assisting with plans for a demonstration of the new Swan shuttle, specifically for the transportation disadvantaged community. That demo is scheduled to take place on the 1st of November. A quick update on our Vision Zero action plans. We kicked off our regional planning effort in late July, and we'll be coming back at future board meetings for more detailed presentations, and that could happen as soon as the November board meeting. Our grant is, as you know, is allowing us to develop localized plans for each of our partner municipalities. And our staff has been working closely with yours to get everything in motion. So you'll be hearing a lot more about the safety action plans, both from us as well as back home in your meetings. You have additional information about that at the end of tab 7 in your agenda books this morning. At the July board meeting, I mentioned briefly our rebranding efforts. Something big has happened recently, and that is that our website has become metroplanorlando.gov. And there are a couple of good reasons to make this change. The .gov domain is safer because of the extra security required for its launch. It's more recognizable to the public as a legitimate government site. And all of our email addresses and web pages and documents will now carry that domain name. But during the transition, the old emails and so on will continue to work for a period of time. We also have refreshed our website content and the graphics included. You'll notice a greater presence for safety and technology information. And we're also offering a roundup of partner information so that you can easily find out what other jurisdictions are doing, and that will all be included in our website. Now I'm happy to share that MetroPlan Orlando's 2022 Notes on the Future annual report won an award of distinction at the recent Florida Public Relations Association Golden Image Awards, and that's a statewide competition. So congratulations to Cynthia, Marianne, and Leilani for that. And I want to welcome back our newest staff members. I'm going to ask Laura Bauk to wave or stand. You may recognize Laura. Laura left us last year. She had been with us for several years and left us last year, but just couldn't stay away. And she came back and started with us on August 14th. And we're very happy to have her. Laura is a professional engineer as well as a certified planner. So we're very happy to have her. Then finally, Jason Lachavo marked 20 years with MetroPlan Orlando last Friday, September 8th. You know, Jason works, he's here at the board meetings, but largely behind the scenes. But many of you do know him. He keeps us all sharp and is largely responsible for the excellent reviews we receive every year from DOT in their annual certification and the risk assessment. He's also responsible for the annual audit report that always comes in very clean. So they're both very important to our success. So congratulations, Jason, on 20 years. Madam Chair, that completes my announcements this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Huffman. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, thank you for that update. We're going to move on to our FDOT report, and Ms. Lorraine Bobo, you are recognized.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me. Secretary apologizes for not being able to make it. He's a very, very busy man. I'd like to give a couple updates and then I'll go on to a safety second. We have started work on the I-4 at 535 interchange project. It's a design build project, which means the design has started and the construction will start once they start having their plans more complete. That is likely to be, the first construction will probably be like early November timeframe. It's a partial construction of that interchange. More work will be done as we're able to advance further projects. Probably the most significant of that project is the new loop ramp on the kind of the northwest quadrant, the Popka Vineland northbound to westbound I-4 towards Tampa, where Crossroads was. It's a pretty big parcel there. It's also adding a single westbound express lane from west of 536 to west of Darrell Carter Parkway. So kind of an extension of the express lane system in that westbound direction towards Tampa. And there's some other work in there as well. That project will take almost 3 years and is $102 million. I'd like to share a little bit about the department's safety strategic plan. We are embarking on a plan that will that our goal is to encompass the entire Central Florida region, not only internally, but externally. How can we all work together towards making our roadways safer? This is really just a kickoff, so I don't have a lot of information to share quite yet, but we're going to be working very closely with MetroPlan Orlando and their parallel effort with the Vision Zero Action Plan, and then your local plans as well. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue doing things that we're doing, but also to do so much more, especially if we're all moving kind of in that same direction. And Commissioner Uribe, you mentioned putting the videos. To me, that's a great opportunity that, hey, do a blast. Here's this week's video, please share it as widely as possible. The more folks that can hear those messages, the better. So please stay tuned for more on that. I've got 2 safety seconds today. The first one is related to occupant protection. Every year we do like a survey of folks and who are wearing their seat belts, car seats, that type of thing. This last one was related to child protection. So, you've got ages 0 to 3, 4 to 5, and 6 to 12. And so I just wanted to give you some stats. In 2022, 40% of our fatalities, all fatalities in Florida, were not wearing a seatbelt or occupant protection. Their chances of survival would have gone up 45% had they made that click. It's so simple. Probably the most, there's a lot of statistics that came out in this report, but probably the most alarming one, and maybe it's not so alarming, it's alarming for me as a mother, but if the adult in the car is not restrained. So, okay, I want to say this the right way. So I'll do ages 6 to 12 because it's the biggest difference. So if the parent or the adult has their seatbelt on, that child has a making sure I'm reading this right. It's kind of a weird 75% that they will have the child will have their seatbelt on, right? So if I get in the car, my boys 100% have their seatbelt on, but generally speaking, 75% of the time they'll have their seatbelt on in the car. But if that parent, that adult does not have their seatbelt, compliance goes down to 16%. 16. So they're watching us. We're setting that example. So that is just crazy to me, because I think everybody should have their seatbelt on. But that's data to show that we're setting that example. Gary and I were talking this morning about the pace car idea. And if we're all just setting that example of going the speed limit, maybe people will follow that. And who's sharing that there was a group that was doing that, and then there was one that was not. And it was all over the place. So together we can do more, and the roadways will be safer. I want to just share a myth or real deal from NHTSA. And it's kind of came up at some previous months meetings, and so I thought it would be interesting to share. The question is, if you're not going far or not traveling fast, seatbelts aren't necessary. Is this myth or a real deal? It's a myth. Seemingly routine trips can be deceptively dangerous. Most fatal crashes happen within 25 miles from home, and it speeds at less than 40 miles per hour. And I know I've had this conversation with my boys. They know now, but even if we're just driving up to the park, which is really within walking distance, but sometimes we're bringing equipment with us and stuff, we're putting our seatbelts on, because you never know when something can happen. So, and last, I'd like to share that Rail Safety Week is next week. We actually had a fatality on our with Sunrail yesterday, which is very, very unfortunate. Basically, the campaign is going to be avoid the impact. If you're in a vehicle, don't stop on the track. You never know when a train's going to be coming, and if that signal is going to change or not. If you are walking across the track, just keep walking and never walk down that corridor rail. So you'll see videos and you'll see a lot of campaigns. On Monday, we're going to be out, I believe it's in Winter Park, doing some media availability. And we've partnered with quite a few law enforcement agencies to be doing, very specific campaigns throughout this whole week. So I'm hoping that that will make a difference. So with that, thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lorraine. We do have a couple questions and comments from the audience. I did want to just commend you. I've driven on the Sand Lake interchange and also in the 535, and I think it's really good that FDOT has banners to show that this is an area that's going to be improving, because you have a lot of folks who don't know what's going on, and that's definitely a positive message. But I want to recognize Commissioner Wilson.
Those are District 1, and we're, grateful for all the communication. Continue to push out anything. If it's big or small, we will continue to push it out to those areas.
Okay.
They're very eager for the final product there. I actually, following up on the comment, I'm like you, as mom, my kids knew that when they were little, we weren't going to put on the very first Disney song if I didn't get everybody clicked. When they're teenagers, they don't get any music at all unless everybody's clicked.
Okay.
I actually had a conversation with a colleague, and I'd be curious to know what your thoughts were on how to approach this, who came into work very rattled because they approached a mother who did not have a restrained toddler in the car or said something to them, and ended up putting what they felt like was themselves a little bit of a risk. And they said, well, what do? You can't call the police when that happens. But I felt like, if she just driven off, I was letting something happen that, if I'd seen her hitting this child in public,
Right.
I would have had, a leg to stand on stopping her.
Yeah. So
So just kind of your thoughts on the way to tell citizens who really are concerned about children in cars to approach that.
Right. It can be a delicate conversation. I've never necessarily approached somebody directly, but I know I've thought about what I would say. And I would approach it from I want you both to go home tonight. I want everybody to go home safely. And I'll share an anecdotal story of a coworker of ours. Every year at our Bring Your Child to Work Day, FHP brings their rollover vehicle. So they've got their, crash test dummies in there buckled in, and they stay in there and they move around and they jostle around. But when they take that seatbelt off and they turn it, that it goes flying out of the car, because that's what happens. And that's a very real reaction. If you are not buckled in, you move around that car. And so a coworker was telling me about how her daughter had seen this, right? And like a year later, in the car with her uncle, mom puts her seatbelt on, she puts her seatbelt on, uncle does not. She's like, uncle, like, you need to put your seatbelt on. He's like, no, I'm an adult. I can make that decision for myself. And she said, no, if you're going to be in the car with me and we are involved in a crash, you're going to hurt me because you're going to be moving all over the place. And so my coworker was just like, wow, okay, that stuck with her. And and it's a reality. So I don't know, it is a difficult conversation, and it's easier to maybe have with like friends and family. And I spoke to a class last Friday morning and said, it's okay to tell your parents to put their seatbelts on and put their phones down, tell them that I love you. And that's why I want that to happen. So. Good point.
Thank you. Mayor Woodruff, you're recognized.
Apparently I don't talk enough. I just wanted to bring up, and I've mentioned it before, the intersection of Mellonville and 46, where we're waiting for a traffic light. There was another accident, and I haven't confirmed it, but I'm told it was a fatal accident last week.
Okay.
The information I got yesterday was contract's been let, we're waiting on materials. And I just want to make sure it's on the radar at the upper levels to make sure we get that as soon as possible. We do have a resident that bird dogs it about once a month to ask when it's going to happen. So I just want to make sure once that's the equipment's in it, we can get it as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. And materials really is an issue right now. But I will check on it. I made a note of it. Thank you for mentioning.
Thank you. Just a question. I'm sure many of us heard about the tragedy in Osceola County with the 3 children and the adult. Do we have any data yet as far as where they, restrained or anything like that?
I don't know that we've seen the report yet to know all of those details. But I can, I can follow up on it for you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from Ms. Bobo? Any, get you in there like Mayor Woodruff? Fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to move on now to our roll call. Ms. Lisa Smith, you are recognized.
Martinez for Arrington. Bates.
Present.
Here. Bonilla, Scott for Bonilla. Castano. Gomez Cordero. Demmings.
Here.
Sheehan for Mayor Dyer.
Here.
Dowlis.
Here.
Good.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Grebe.
Here.
Janer.
Here.
Delari for Lockhart.
Here.
Moore. Nelson. Ortiz. Uribe.
Present.
Wilson. Here. Woodruff.
Here.
Zimbauer. Madam Chair, that concludes the roll call, and we do have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We're going to move on to our agenda review. Mr. Hunt.
Yeah, the only thing, Commissioner, that I want to mention is that last Thursday, Lisa sent out an amended agenda that removed one presentation from the agenda and replaced it with another. And that would have been agenda item 12B. So I just want to make sure that the board understands that you will not be hearing an update on dynamic tolling this month, that you will be receiving an update on the TISML master plan. So I just wanted to call attention to that. So we're ready to move forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Huntman, we're going to move on to committee reports. We're going to first hear from our Municipal Advisory Committee. Mayor John Dallas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Municipal Advisory Committee met last week on September 7th. MAC approved our July meeting minutes. We then approved the FDOT amendment to fiscal year 2024 to 2028 TIP. The MAC voted to approve the FDOT roll forward amendment for fiscal year 2024 to 2028. The MAC received two presentations, received a status update on MetroPlan Orlando's Regional Vision Zero Action Plan. MAC then received an update on the active transportation plan, including feedback from recent workshops. MAC meets next November 2nd, and this concludes my report.
Any questions or comments for Mayor Dallas? Seeing none, thank you, Mayor. We're going to move on to the Community Advisory Committee, where Mr. Jeffrey Campbell is still celebrating from the FSU win over LSU and has an update for us.
Actually, I'm a Tennessee fan now. I'll tell you that story later. But good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. And Madam Chair, congratulations again on your recent election. The Community Advisory Committee met on August 23rd and recommended approval of an amendment and roll forward amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program. CAC members got an update on the region's Vision Zero Action Plan, and members were very supportive of this plan's development and efforts to prevent traffic deaths and serious injuries in Central Florida. Members also heard an update on the active transportation plan before dismissing for a workshop to look at proposed active transportation projects across the 3 counties. CAC members provided many comments on the projects and also discussed the need to improve bike and pedestrian facilities and the need to better define the role of electric scooters and bicycles in our system. The CAC will not meet for a regular meeting in September. However, on September 27th, the Community Advisory Committee will take a field trip to the Regional Transportation Management Center in Sanford for a tour and discussion of TISMO's master plan. This will also give us an opportunity to look at technical solutions to transportation issues in our region. So come join us if you're free. Our next regular CAC meeting will be October 25th. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any questions or comments? Looks like you guys had a fantastic meeting and an adventurous one coming up. And no, Commissioner Grebe is not stomping on the floor next to me. It appears that there's some work underneath them.
If I disappear, they'll all of a sudden.
We're going to move on to the Technical Advisory Committee. Mr. Bill Wharton, you are recognized.
Good morning,
Good
Madam
morning.
Chair and board members. The Technical Advisory Committee met last month on August 25th. Like the other advisory committees, TAC met in person with a physical quorum present. Our action items, all of which were unanimously approved, included our meeting minutes from the June 30th meeting, our recommendation to this board to amend the FY 2024 Transportation Improvement Program to include the 10th Street Complete Streets Project Phase 1, and to recommend approval of the amendment of the TIP for the FDOT rollover projects. We received update presentations on the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan and the Active Transportation Plan. Immediately following the TAC meeting, TAC members participated in the Active Transportation Workshop, where they gave feedback on proposed project recommendations to be included in the full Active Transportation Plan. The next TAC meeting is set for October 27th at 10 a.m. And Madam, that is my report.
Thank you, Ms. Morton. Any questions or comments? You guys have your names switched around in front of you, but it's all good. We're going to move on to the Transportation System Management and Operations Advisory Committee. Mr. Shad Smith, you are recognized.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. The Transportation Systems Management Operation TISMO Advisory Committee met on August 25th, 2023. We approved the meeting minutes for the June 30th TISMO meeting. We also approved the two staff action items to amend the fiscal year 2024-2028 Transportation Improvement Plan. The first one was a recommendation for the 10th Street Complete Street Project, which is a project supported with a federal discretionary raise grant of $1.2 million. The second recommendation is to roll forward the projects from the 2023-2027 TIP. We had two presentations. One of them was from Mr. Mike Wilson, the MetroPlan Orlando, gave a presentation on the Vision Zero Regional Plan. And also Mr. Jeremy Dillmore of FDOT District 5 gave a presentation on FDOT PedSafe. This project uses technology to improve pedestrian safety. It was a very good presentation. Our next TISMO meeting will be held on October 27th at 8:30 a.m. That concludes my report, Madam Chairman.
Any questions or comment for Mr. Smith? I want to thank all of our committee reports for all your thoroughness. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to public comment on action items. I want to ask if there is any person who has a public comment either in person or online for an action item. Ms. Smith, are you aware of anyone?
Yes, we have received a speaker card from Ms. Amy Martello.
Okay, Ms. Martello, you are recognized. Good morning.
Representing the city of Winter Garden. Do I have to hit?
No, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm representing the city of Winter Garden, 300 West Plant Street, Winter Garden, Florida, 34787. I'm here to express the city of Winter Garden support for the board reapportionment scenario C. We understand that we are represented by Orange County seats, but we also recognize that our needs at times may differ from the counties. And so we would appreciate the opportunity and believe that it's important for us to have a seat at the table. And thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for your comment. Any other comments in person or online?
I have not received any more for in person. I don't see any hands raised online.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. Commissioner DeLaury.
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second, Janer.
So we have a motion by Commissioner DeLaury, a second by Commissioner Janer. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Fantastic. We're going to move on to our other action items. A, FDOT amendment to the FY 2024 through 2028 TIP. This will be a roll call vote. Mr. Jason Sartario, you are recognized. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Jason Sartorio. This morning, I have one TIP amendment for you. Additional information regarding this amendment is located in tab 2 of your agendas. This morning's amendment is for the 10th Street Complete Street Project, Phase 1. This is a new project which is being funded through a federal discretionary grant awarded to the city of St. Cloud. As I mentioned earlier, you have some additional information on this amendment located in tab 2 of your agendas. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your motion of approval of the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Are there any questions or
Motion for
comments?
approval?
So we have a motion by Commissioner Janer, a second by Commissioner Grebe. This will be a roll call vote.
Martinez,
Aye.
Bates,
Yes.
Scott, Castano.
Aye.
Gomez Cordero.
Aye.
Demings.
Aye.
Sheehan.
Aye.
Dallas.
Aye.
Good. Green. Grebe.
Yes.
Janer.
Yes.
Delari.
Yes.
Uribe. Wilson. Woodruff.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carried unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. I also want to go ahead and recognize that Commissioner Moore has joined us for the meeting. And that is a unanimous approval. We are now going to move on to Part B, which is FDOT Roll Forward Amendment to FY 2024-2028 TIP. This is also a roll call vote, and Jason, you are recognized once more.
This includes projects which have funds that were originally programmed in last year's TIP fiscal year 23. These funds were not committed by the end of the fiscal year on June 30th, so they automatically roll forward to fiscal year 24 and FDOT's new adopted 5-year work program, which came out in July. On our end, we need to amend our TIP to include these project funds so that we can remain consistent with the work program. This does not affect the cost or schedule of these projects. And as many of you know, this is a routine procedure that we go through at this time every year. The information regarding this is in tab 3 of your agenda packets. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your motion of approval of the amendment.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions or comments?
Motion to approve, Janer.
A second, please.
Second, Delari.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Janer, a second by Commissioner Delari. This again is also a roll call vote. And Ms. Smith, we're ready.
Martinez.
Aye.
Bates.
Yes.
Scott. Castano. Gomez Cordero.
Aye.
Demings.
Aye.
Sheehan.
Aye.
Dallas.
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Green.
Yes.
Grebe.
Aye.
Janer.
Yes.
Delari.
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Uribe. Wilson.
Yes.
Woodruff.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, motion carried unanimously.
All right, thank you again, Jason. We're going to move on to the approval of the executive committee recommendation on board apportionment. Mr. Alex Trauger, you are recognized to give us an update from the executive committee.
Certainly. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. Today, we are asking your approval of the MPO membership apportionment plan. In its purest form, this plan identifies our 3-county study area and also the membership voting and non-voting membership of this governing board. As we've discussed in previous presentations, this apportionment plan has to be updated every decade, every 10 years, following the census as prompted by USDOT. Since our last presentation to this board, we convened our executive committee. They met, they reviewed different options and have made a recommendation, which I'll be presenting to you today, which is found at tab 4 of your agenda packets. As you can see here, this is our current apportionment plan. And I wanted to call your attention to these numbers before we get into what is proposed. This does include 20 voting members, and as you can see, 5 non-voting members. Our 5 non-voting advisors from FDOT, the Kissimmee Gateway Airport, and the chairs of our community technical and systems management and operations advisory committees participate in board discussion, but do not vote on action items, thus are not included for purposes of achieving a physical quorum. This is what that apportionment looks like in a tabular format, and I'll show you this here in a few minutes as it relates to the proposed. But as you can see, 15 seats based on population for our cities, counties and cities, seats representing our operating agencies, and the seat for our municipal advisory committee chair, which represents those cities that are not directly represented on the MetroPlan Orlando board. We convened the executive committee on August 15th, as I mentioned earlier. They considered multiple scenarios and variations of these scenarios. And each of the scenarios looked at statutory requirements and different ways of apportioning the board based on growth and different changes of growth in the region. Based on that discussion, the executive committee made the recommendation to update board membership based on statutory requirements, but also considering the substantial growth that the region has received. And in doing that, they are looking to they recommended to 1 seat for every 100,000 population. And in the result of this methodology has 150,000, rather. In that methodology, the result of that is 2 new voting seats, one for the Orange County Board of County Commissioners and one for the city of St. Cloud. St. Cloud is due to their population. Cities with a population of greater than 50,000 must be represented on the board per federal law, so I'll leave it at that. And again, this is what that looks like in tabular form. The only change to our board's voting composition is in 1 additional seat, as you can see, for Orange County, which brings them to a total of 7. And the new addition of St. Cloud joining our board. They're currently seated on our municipal advisory committee, but based on the board's recommendation, they will be seated on the board. This maintains, as you can see, maintains all of our existing apportioned seats. All of our operating partners, those agencies remain constant, as similar to the municipal advisory committee. So once the board takes action on this, we have to submit this to FDOT by mid-November. That is the requirement based on the schedule. So based on your recommendation and approval today, we'll be transmitting that to FDOT for their review and submittal to the governor for his approval. And then we'll be working in parallel with our affected local government agencies, but also we're continuing that coordination with our counterparts at the other MPOs, specifically the Lake Sumter MPO and the Polk TPO. But with that, we are asking for your approval today as presented. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to field those, but this is an action item for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Wilson.
So what was the population? I don't see a lot of supplemental information for the municipalities, Winter Garden and Ocoee.
Those populations are in and around 40 to 45,000 or just over 45,000. So Winter Garden, Ocoee have a population of greater than 45. The census or the federal law says 50 or greater shall be on the board. As we were exploring different scenarios, we were just trying to look at different variations of recommending.
So did the recommendation come down to population, or was there some other particular?
Well, there was a scenario. I'll go back to it just for ease of purpose here. Scenario. So the board recommended a variation of scenario B, which is so scenario B looked at dividing population by 100,000 and also looked at dividing population by 150,000. The executive committee recommended what we call scenario B, which was meeting statutory requirements, keeping all of our existing apportioned seats, but also growing accordingly. Scenario C lowered that bar. Instead of 50,000, it lowered it to 45,000, which resulted in municipalities, like as I mentioned before, Winter Garden and
Alex,
would have
as
members
a
of the board.
clarity point too, when the executive board met, we didn't want to constrain future MetroPlan board.
I was just curious about what the
Because
kind of
if we would be
population
maxing out our seats and to allow the ability to grow and knowing that the next census would definitely bring changes, we didn't want to take over everything and just lock it down where it wasn't available. So that's where we came up to scenario B, where it offered that. Mayor Demings.
Move approval for the requested action.
Second, Janer.
So we have a motion, okay. Mayor Dallas, Mayor Dallas, go ahead.
I just was gonna ask, what's the population of Winter? I thought it was 50,000.
No,
I did
it's
too.
40, it's
I did too.
40 something. It's
And
not
we're
50.
And just as a point of information, we're looking at populations as of the time of the 2020 census.
It did not reach 50,000. And yes, it's good.
And that's why we looked at 45 as a different angle of growth.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
I get it wrong, have to. I randomly hit it. I'd like to propose that the Orlando Executive Airport have a non-voting ad hoc seat. The Executive Airport, Kissimmee has a seat as the city, and Kissimmee, and I think for a very good reason, the Kissimmee Airport has a non-voting position. Kissimmee Airport's important. While it's owned by the city of Kissimmee, it has its own distinct mission. It has its known distinct executive director, its budget is distinct. The Sanford Airport has a voting membership, and though it's, relatively small. The Orlando Executive Airport is one of the biggest executive airports in the Southeast. Sits on 1,000 acres of land downtown Orlando. It's gonna be, you're talking about vertical takeoff and landing and interchanges, and there's a lot of stuff. It's also very important to the community. If I could use this slur that I hate, it's been treated kind of as a redheaded stepchild. People say anyway, to GOA. While it's a part of GOA, it has its own distinct budget that has to be kept separate. It has its own CEO or its own executive director. It has its own board of directors. It's an advisory board, but it has its own board. It has a lot of community involvement. And so I think it would be helpful to MetroPlan and to the community, particularly the community that is in the city of Orlando around the executive airport, that it have, a non-voting ad hoc member, just like the city of Kissimmee has.
So
I'm not asking for a voting position like Sanford has,
So
but a
just to,
non-voting position.
Alex, I'll take this off you. So at the executive board meeting, that was brought up, and Mayor Demings and Mayor Dyer also serve on GOA. And they felt confident that GOA was well represented on this board and rejected the executive seat. Now, if the
So
board,
2 members of GOA board
Three
didn't
members.
want the executive airport to have.
yeah, it
and the
was
community around it.
discussed and it was on the minutes that they felt that GOA was well represented. Mayor Demings, I don't know if you'd like to,
This is an ad hoc position. I'm not suggesting that. Does it matter?
Based on what Mr. Gould is suggesting, I'm really not opposed to an ad hoc non-voting position. I'm not sure that it was necessarily presented in that manner. My interpretation was it was regarding having some type of voting position, but if it's an ad hoc, I'm not opposed to it. I can go either way.
Yeah.
okay.
Just ad hoc. That's all.
So let's do this. Procedurally, I don't know, Mayor, would you like to amend your motion?
I will amend a motion to accept the recommendation to include membership of a representative from the Orlando Executive Airport on the ad hoc, as an ad hoc member.
Second Gomez.
We already had a second, Commissioner
Oh,
Gainer.
I thought there was another.
Okay, so we have amended the motion to say that there will be
Sorry, that was a misunderstanding.
a non-voting representative for the Orlando Executive Airport, and it is a non-voting ad hoc position. Yes.
Sorry to revisit. So what the motion is on and what we're discussing is the recommendation. There's not going to be any further discussion about the other scenarios. Those were taken
Yeah,
up in.
those were taken by the executive, yes. Okay. And so, all in favor, say aye.
Chair.
Aye. Yes.
Can I just ask that we be allowed to check the state statutes to see that that's acceptable?
Okay,
And if it is, then it will be added. If it's not, then it will go back to the original motion.
okay, with that exception, yes, with that asterisk. So any opposed? So this is a unanimous vote, all in favor. Thank you very much. Oh. I'm so sorry, Commissioner.
Madam Chair,
All right, we're gonna
Madam
move
Chair.
on. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
when is the effective date of reapportionment? Because I'm assuming that will result from me being an alternate member to a permanent member. So what would that be?
Mr. Hutton.
Yeah, the governor will sign off, or his designee will sign off sometime in January. So we anticipate the new board sitting for the February meeting.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott. Sorry, I didn't see you back there. Okay, we're gonna move on to the approval of the executive committee recommendation on the internal operating procedures. Ms. Virginia Whittington, you are recognized. Great to see you this morning.
Good to see you as well. Good morning, Madam Chair and members. This is a overview of the proposed changes to the MetroPlan Orlando. Internal operating procedures also reviewed by the executive committee on August 15th. There is a synopsis in your agenda at tab 5 for those of you who haven't, and I think it's also available to you on your Taden devices. Our internal operating procedures describe how the organization operates on a day-to-day basis. It also provides guidance for how the MetroPlan Orlando Board and its committees function. These operating procedures were formerly part of Rule 35I of the Florida Administrative Code and first adopted in 2004 as the internal operating procedures. Since then, there have been several periodic reviews that have resulted in necessary changes. This happens about every 2 to 3 years. The most recent was in 2020. So today I will review for you some of the major changes. I'm not going to go through all of the details of the minor adjustments that may be necessary because of Scrivener's errors and some of those grammatical changes that we need to make. But what has precipitated these have been your board apportionment discussion that you just had, clarification of the board officer duties, the elections and how those are conducted, and how vacancies in those board officers would be handled, in-person quorum, and remote participation by voting members, and then clarification of the TIP amendment process. And then there was an item that was first proposed at the executive committee meeting having to do with how to handle time-sensitive items. And that item has been withdrawn because we got further clarification from the Federal Highway Administration. And then there was some outdated language that had been removed regarding our Minority Business Enterprise Program. So first in section 3, we proposed changes again to the board apportionment and voting membership based on the decision and approvals that you just made. Orange County will be added with an additional seat and the city of St. Cloud. And again, this is contingent upon the governor's approval of the apportionment plan once it is submitted to them. This increases the membership from 20 to 22, and it also addresses the alternate members and those appointments which stipulate that those alternate members must be members of the same governing body. In Orange County, as Commissioner Scott noted yesterday at your meeting, this means you can't call him anymore. And then moving on in section 4, this has a new section that outlines how the apportionment is handled. The internal operating procedures were previously silent on this, so we've just added a clarifying section that notes that the composition is reviewed every 10 years as necessary. And so that has been brought into our internal operating procedures. With regard to board officers, the chairperson has been clarified that the chairperson will preside over board officer elections. In December, this is when you take up your officers for the next year. And it determines that the chairperson will preside over that procedure. And it outlines how those procedures will be conducted step by step. Language has also been included to clarify that the vice chair, when acting in the role as chair, has the signature authority as the same as the board chair in the absence of the chair. And also, again, the election process is outlined. And then a new paragraph has been added to identify how vacancies in the board officers are handled. For instance, if the board chair, for whatever reason, is unable to complete his or her term, the vice chair will assume that role. This is similar to many of your boards that you serve on. In section 8, again, proposed and clarifying language that the agency clerk will conduct a roll call at the beginning of each meeting. Once a physical in-person quorum is reached, and this has always been statutorily allowed, that a person who would be attending the meeting either telephonically or today, as Commissioner Sheehan is joining us virtually, that they are able to participate in the deliberations and vote once that in-person quorum has been met. And then those same would apply to the board committees. And again, we had proposed initially that language would be included that would allow us a process for amending the Metropolitan Transportation Plan as well as the TIP when things happen in between meetings. For instance, we don't have a meeting next month. So if something were to come about, the board chair would be able to act on that and then be fully ratified by the board at the very next meeting. We wanted to extend that from just these two items to some other items that may occur. And we received some feedback from FHWA that was not something that they were comfortable with. And Jay also brought that up to our attention. And so we have reverted back to the original language that was in the internal operating procedures. With regard to the Minority Business Enterprise Program, we removed all the outdated language, and we are now under the umbrella, which we have been as our practice, of the Florida Department of Transportation's DBE program. So there's really no change to that. We just wanted to call attention to when you saw all those strike throughs that we do have a minority business program, but we're under the umbrella of the Florida Department of Transportation. And with that, Madam Chair, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but we're looking for the board's approval to make these changes, and also with your authority that if there's any other Scribner's errors that we find, that we're able to make those adjustments as well.
Thank you, Ms. Whittington. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Yes, Mayor Dallas.
On, under election process, where it says more than one person is nominated, a roll call shall be conducted. Does that mean a roll call vote shall be conducted?
Yes.
Should we clarify that?
Normally, we have roll call when
Uh-huh.
it's a roll call and the other ones are just a vote.
So that was my question. So if it's more than one nominator, are we then by a roll call stating who we're voting for, or is it
Correct.
just a roll call?
It would be a roll call vote. So when we look at the agenda, yeah, I mean, we could add vote. So as a Scrivener's error,
Sure, happy to.
we
make
could
that
add vote
adjustment.
since it always does say it in our agenda, roll call vote. Okay, Mayor Dallas, are you satisfied? Okay, any other questions or comments?
Motion to approve, Janer.
Second, Scott.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Janer, a second by Commissioner Scott. All in favor, say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? It passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Whittington.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're going to move on to the approval of the federal certification report. Mr. Joe Sullivan from Federal Highway, you are recognized and good morning. Good morning.
Now you can. Excellent. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, team members. Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Joe Sullivan. I'm an environmental protection specialist with the Florida Division of the Federal Highway Administration. I've been assigned planning responsibilities throughout the state, and Gary and his team apparently drew the short straw and got me, and I was assigned to conduct the 2023 TMA certification review of the Orlando Kissimmee TMA, more commonly referred to as MetroPlan Orlando. I'm here today to present the summary of the 2023 federal certification review conducted on March 15th, 2023. Federal law requires the administration, Federal Highway Administration, and Federal Transit Administration to jointly review and certify the metropolitan transportation planning processes for each TMA every 4 years. As part of the TMA certification review process, FHWA and FTA utilizes a risk-based approach containing various factors to determine which topic areas require additional evaluation. Again, it's the technology. Here we go. Which factors require additional evaluation during the certification review. The certification review process is one of the several methods used to assess the quality of a regional metropolitan transportation planning process, compliance with applicable statutes and regulations, and the degree of technical assistance needed to enhance effectiveness of the planning processes. The TMA certification has 3 basic steps. We perform a desk audit of all published plans and documents and elements identified in the risk assessment. We conduct a site visit to discuss with the team those elements and provide the MPO an opportunity to brief us on their initiatives and practices. And we issue a formal report and closeout presentation to present the findings. Our team members were myself, Ms. Jean Parlow, a planner out of the Orlando office of Federal Highways, Curleen Thomas, had just joined us from FDOT at the time, so she sat in on March 15th review, Carrie Shepard, our legal and civil rights counselor, and Aviance Webb from the Federal Transit Administration. Our findings from the process are as follows. The TMA in total has 7 noteworthy practices, 0 corrective actions, and 0 recommendations to improve the process. Yeah, that's a great start, isn't it? Noteworthy practice number 1, the federal review team was impressed. And I think this has been I think you guys are all used to it, but from a federal perspective, this is very interesting for me. And I'm not typical. The federal review team was impressed with the MPO's organizational structure, which not only promotes effective decision-making, but also serves as a comprehensive method for promoting the MPO and its products. As with other Florida planning agencies, the MPO has political, technical, bike ped, citizen, and transportation disadvantaged committees or boards that work to engage the public and identify transportation needs and produce planning solutions. However, the MPO has a transportation system management operations committee ensuring that congestion management and traffic operations are fully integrated to the system-wide planning. This is particularly important since 20% of the MPO's public relations funding is allotted to the TSMO. Further, the MPO created a municipal advisory committee and safety advisory group. The first provides a voice to the elected officials of the area and areas, cities, and towns, and those who might not otherwise have an opportunity to address issues impacting their service populations. The latter demonstrates extra focus on the insight into safety, making Vision Zero more than a performance measure, rather a means of integrating safety into the MPO structure and operations. The MPO federal team also found the MPO's standing committees noteworthy. For example, federal regulations do not require public involvement by committee. The Community Advisory Committee is a model for the approach. When most agencies struggle to obtain the CAC membership that is a representative of their demography, the MPO CAC achieved parity with the demographics of the 3-county area. In fact, the MPO received over 40 applications for the 5 available CAC seats. The MPO attributes this remarkable accomplishment to the persistent identification of and extensive outreach to those serving vulnerable and traditionally underserved communities. Our third noteworthy practice with the MPO planning organizational structure. Again, we noted a number of elected officials and advisory committee members have connection with the MPO that span decades through service on various committees or their work on different community interest organizations. For example, one MPO stakeholder recalled having first participated in the MPO steering group before joining the CAC. 2 years later, before joining the CAC. Now, 5 years later, she is on the CAC and an active proponent for safer bike and ped facilities. Another technical stakeholder noted that her close involvement with the MPO for many years while she was employed first with the city and then later the county. When she left local government to serve local government service to work for a passenger rail company, she found it entirely natural to continue involvement in the transportation for passenger rail company. She found it very natural to continue her involvement in transportation planning, effectively providing the MPO with another modal representative and regional partner. Our fourth noteworthy practice was from FTA. The Federal Review Team praises the MPO MetroPlan Orlando for continued expansion of the Transportation Disadvantaged Program. The program has dedicated coordination board, bylaws in place, and grievance procedures to address and support those services. The program offers several opportunities that highlight safety and awareness, such as the blind experience, White Cane safety message, and the TD Day. Our fifth noteworthy practice is outreach and public participation. As one of Florida's largest TMAs, the MPO has a long history of innovation and outreach and engagement techniques. Since the last review, the MPO altered the public participation plan structure, streamlining the plan so it's a leaner document, more user-friendly, and key information is positioned prominently and earlier in the document. The MPO went a step further and hired a new staff position, a communications coordinator, so that it could expand the outreach effort and live the plan through a regular continued presence in the communities. The results are excellent and integrated into all the MPO programs. Touch on outreach and public participation. Again, the federal review team was also impressed with the practical manner in which the MPO assesses the involvement strategies and adjusts to ensure it maintains a vibrant and growing program. The MPO only had a few months pre-pandemic activities under the revised PPP before having to radically adjust it for remote participation. However, the return to the typical environment, while the other organizations were striving for full hybrid engagement, this MPO took a pragmatic view, plainly stating that the hybrid public involvement and its resource intensive, garnering negative impact from both those attending in person and those online. It's interesting that while the MPO did not discontinue the increasingly popular remote platforms, they separate the in-person, the remote meetings so that it can provide full staff attention to both. The MPO is also attempting to track remote participation to determine whether it is related to the increased volume of in-person participation and attendance. These may be unexplored aspects of public involvement that can inform the MPO's future public involvement strategies. And lastly, linking planning and NEPA. The federal review team commends two specific elements of the MPO's linking planning and NEPA efforts. First, it recently kicked off resilience study using students at a local Florida university. This is a savvy decision that will help brand the MPO and its role for a demographic that is hard to engage. The MPO also recognizes the study principles are those that are most likely to be impacted in the long term by environmental changes, as well as those that are generally closer to and more passionate about the subject and those who traditionally participate in the transportation decision-making processes. Secondly, while many citizen and leaders associate resiliency planning with coastal impacts and responses, this MPO works with the university to focus on inland resilience, which plans to result in a primer unrelated to saltwater and storm surge impacts and recovery. I'd like to express my appreciation and recognition of the hard work and time dedicated to preparing for this TMA certification by your MPO staff and your partner and teams. They made this certification review relatively easy and almost enjoyable. The MPO has demonstrated flexibility in its ability to address adversity and use innovative techniques and strategies to do so. To Gary and his team, I appreciate working with all of them. If there's any questions, I'll take them now.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. I want to recognize Commissioner Delari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, Mr. Solomon, thank you for pointing all those things out. I will tell you, no matter who you speak to here at this table, we all try to be very inclusive. We all try to watch out for each other, even though we represent either a city or a county. We look at the region as a whole. So if something's happening outside of my county, we're all willing to jump in and help. And it's that transparency and inclusiveness that really, we believe, that makes Central Florida a special place to not only live, but raise a family and work. So thank you for pointing all that out. The question that I have is, on your report for your review of your risk assessment, it's in looking all the different categories. The one that I'd like to have additional information on is the transit one where it says selected for additional review. That's the only one. I'd like to know why it was selected and what your findings were.
They are separate. The transit administration does.
I understand that, but I'd like to know,
information.
in your report, it actually says that additional review is selected. And I'd just like to know what your findings were and what we can learn from that review.
I'm gonna pull a blank on you. I don't know right now.
Okay.
I'll have to get
If
back.
you can get that to us, I greatly
can.
appreciate it. Because when there's something that's outstanding like that, I think we all need to embrace why that review is needed and what
Right.
the findings were.
Understood.
Thank you.
Understood. We'll get you the
Fantastic.
answer.
Commissioner Jainer.
I don't know about any of you board members. I couldn't be prouder to be part of this board and couldn't be prouder of Gary and the entire MPO team. This review just proves that their hard work and determination is really paying off, and to be almost a pleasurable that you couldn't have a better review. So with that, Madam Chair, I just wanted to move for approval.
And Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to let you know, not only do we work together as a region, but I think the success of us in Central Florida, which many MPOs look at us around the state, is based on such great work between the leadership of the three counties and our mayors that are present here, and all of us being active. And so Gary and I have the pleasure of going to the MPOAC meetings and seeing, everyone's like, what's all, Central Florida doing now? So it is an honor to be a part of this. And with that, we have a motion from Commissioner Jainer, a second from Commissioner Scott. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And it is unanimous. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan, for your time and your impressive report of us. We are now going to move on to informational items for acknowledgement. If I can have a motion.
Move to approve as presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Delary, a second by Commissioner Moore. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, and passes unanimously. There's also a good bicycle and pedestrian report for you guys to notate that's on that report. Now we want to move on to other business and presentations. We have an update on active transportation plan from Ms. Taylor Laurent from MetroPlan Orlando. Ms. Laurent, you are recognized.
Right, good morning. I'm kind of nervous following up on Joe's presentation. Hopefully we can live up to that with the summary of the work that we've been doing on the active transportation plan since the last time we spoke about this back in January of this year. So the purpose of this plan is to be able to identify projects to improve access for bicyclists, pedestrians, and anyone rolling in our communities, and also to improve safety for our most vulnerable roadway users. So again, there's been a lot of work that's been completed since the last time we spoke about this. Our existing conditions report is available on our project website. But just a summary of the evaluations that have been done so far include looking at safety, speeding throughout our three counties, the perception of comfort or stress that people experience when they're walking, biking, or rolling on our facilities, as well as accessibility to key destinations throughout our three county area, and looking at demographics and equity. One of the other items that we've really spent some time on is formalizing our facility type definitions, an example of which is the illustration shown here on the slide for side paths and trails. With these consistent definitions, it allows us to have a common language that we can use when speaking to our committee members, our staff, but as well as the public to make sure we're all talking about the same things. We've taken the results of all of these different evaluations and combined them to create new project recommendations throughout the region. These generally fall into four categories of new trail segments, intersection crossing improvements, corridor improvements, as well as a few key locations where a bicycle pedestrian bridge or tunnel could be advantageous for safety purposes. We've also highlighted a few policy recommendations that we're drafting up at the moment, looking at Americans with Disabilities Act accessibility, especially with the adoption of PROAG, the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines later this month, establishing a consistent vulnerable user count program throughout our three county area, looking at micromobility program recommendations or items to keep in mind if those companies are approaching you to bring that into the local area, as well as some recommendations on bicycle facility and selection as new projects are taken forth. We presented all of these draft recommendations to the CAC as well as TAC back in August. We had an open house style workshop throughout here in the office. You can see some photos from that on the slide here. We're able to get some really good feedback when it comes to the public opinion of these different project recommendations, as well as feasibility recommendations to help us customize those to be able to serve local needs. We're currently taking that feedback and using it to refine those project recommendations to ultimately finish the active transportation plan by the end of this year. We will be sharing those updated project recommendations throughout October with the public. So in a few weeks, just 2 weeks, come quickly, we're going to be sending you some emails to help spread the word and share the message about the active transportation plan so you can get as much feedback as we can during that public engagement period. So that's my very quick update for you today, but I am available to answer any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. Do we have any questions or comments? Seeing you were very speedy. Oh, we do. Mr. Good.
Very important. You know, I supported Mayor Deming's push for the transportation tax. When a lot of my Winter Park friends think about buses, they think it's something that doesn't affect them. When they think about, they sometimes get a little annoyed at bicyclists. I have to remind them there's 40 people in that bus that could be 40 more cars driving down 436, dodging in and out. And you're sort of getting them out of your way. Got to talk to these people a little different. You know, if that bicycle was a car, it would be a lot more annoying. And if people are able to bike like your kids, it allows, and that's such, now from an equity standpoint, that's such an expensive cost, a car. When you look at depreciation and mileage and you look at tires and it is a burden on a lot of people. So what you're doing is important. Tell us what you mean by equity in transportation.
Yes, so you touched on some of that in your comments, but what we were really seeing is that in transportation disadvantaged areas, so places where people don't necessarily have higher incomes, access to a vehicle, zero car households and the such, we're finding that there are fewer active transportation facility options available, as well as they're generally a bit more unsafe and a higher stress situation. So when you think of a shared use path or a side path trail, those are dedicated facilities for bicyclists, pedestrians, and people rolling. When you look at the sidewalk along State Road 50, for example, it's a 40 to 50 mile per hour road, high volumes of vehicles, and the sidewalk is generally right there at the edge of the curb line. So that is a very stressful and riskier situation. We're seeing that those high stress facilities, locations of less safety, are in these transportation disadvantaged areas.
And they discourage people from riding their bikes, which
Mhm.
means they get in a car.
If they have that choice to make.
If they
So
have a
what we
choice to
have
make.
been seeing in the data is that if there is a choice, the vehicle would be preferable. A lot of these people do not have that option, so they are forced to use the more dangerous biking or walking conditions. Those perception of safety and comfort doesn't always equal the amount of volumes that we're seeing out on the road.
Thank you, Ms. Laurent.
Appreciate it.
Yes, we're going to move on to the update on the TISMO master plan. Mr. Eric Hill, you are recognized. Mr. Hill, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the board. This is update on our Transportation Systems Management Operations Master Plan. This was first introduced to you in February. So we've done a lot of work since then. And TISMO is using technology to improve transportation. I used to give the spiel of information communication technology, but just technology. The project is being managed by Kimberly Horn and Jim Woods, who's with me this morning. The vision is just that, leveraging existing technology, enhancing that so that we can improve safety, reliability. And I'll channel our former executive director for a moment, Harry Barley, who used to say that transportation is economic development. And so whatever we receive, whatever we send, it is transported. So there's a way for us to improve that as well. The goals are similar to our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, so they're probably familiar to you. I won't spend too much time on those. We do have a steering committee made up of each of the counties, City of Orlando, as well as the Expressway and the Turnpike. We've had 5 meetings. We have 2 left. We were on schedule to complete this next month. However, in the parlance of American football rules, we had to call an audible in shifting. So we're gonna extend this out to December. Here are the tasks. I've already mentioned the goals and objectives. The existing conditions is a data collection effort that the team underwent, and I'll roll that into the needs assessment as I speak this morning. And then prioritization, how we will list these projects. I have an asterisk there, low technology versus high technology. Usually when we talk TISMO, we're talking high technology, sensors, devices, cameras, technology. However, the low technology, striping on the roadways, intersection improvements, low technology, but have important improvement opportunities. The last 2 items that we have to complete are strategies and funding and action plan, which we will roll into the next update of our MTP. The needs assessment. This effort we went through with the steering committee. We looked at existing conditions. We looked at the regional ITS architecture. This is a document that has a lot of lines, a lot of boxes, a lot of circles. It's very boring. But the Federal Highway Administration requires that we maintain one, and we comply with it in order for us to use funding for these types of projects. We did stakeholder interviews as well. So through that effort, we developed a gap analysis. We looked at current status, outcomes, what the agencies want to achieve, and that helped us identify those gaps. We used the ASTO model to look at, to establish categories of gaps, infrastructure and systems, strategies and operations, and agencies and organizations. I'll touch on each of these. Under infrastructure and systems, assessing system performance. How can we monitor the system? I like to tell the story of every year I go get my physical and I do these exams and my doctor says, you look great. You are great. And that's what we want to do with technology. We want to be able to monitor our transportation system and always say that it looks great. Traffic signals, that's been one of our noteworthy programs. Each year for the last, I think, 15 years, we've been doing updates of our traffic signals around the region. Preemption and priority, and that is a feature of how we can time and operate our traffic signals so that emergency management vehicles, as well as transit vehicles, can get through intersections when they need to. Another feature of this is they're starting across the nation, starting to look at how we can prioritize or preempt signals for freight movement as well. Freight movement, freight traffic. Transit technologies, using vehicles as probes, but also developing apps so that people can make decisions on how they want to make their trips and use transit. Bicycle pedestrians, here's where we have an opportunity to reduce those crashes involving pedestrians and bicyclists. Connected vehicles and cell phones, how they can be connected so that at intersections, the vehicles can detect pedestrians, but also the pedestrians can have apps on their phones that alert them that a vehicle is approaching. So next few slides, I'm going to identify some of the gaps in each of the counties. This is Orange County, and it looks orange to me, those lines. I'm not sure how they look to everyone else, but they look orange to me. But that's where we have fiber gaps, and then the green squares is where we have gaps in terms of devices. This is Osceola County, Seminole County. And please note that in Seminole County, we have those hashes along the roadways. Seminole County is doing a lot with connected and autonomous vehicles, or at least looking at how we can collect data from these vehicles and use those in operations. Which is not. Okay. Okay, thank you. This is City of Orlando. Strategies and operations in the next area of the gap. Project scoping. Here's what we want to talk about. When we identify an opportunity and make an improvement, how far along the timeline do we go before we start looking at TISMO strategies or integrating TISMO strategies with other types of improvements? Performance and investments. Here's where the data comes in so that we can do performance of the transportation system. Training, because as technology continues to change, staff needs to stay up to date on it. Collaboration is one of those things that we do a good job of here in District 5 and within the MetroPlan Orlando region with our TISMO committee as well as our TISMO consortium. And interoperability is just how we can exchange opportunities between the jurisdictions. One learns something, we can teach that to one of the other jurisdictions before they proceed. Lastly, agency and organization, improving the workforce because it's changing. We see the evolution of seasoned employees moving out and younger employees coming in. So how we help train the workforce, and then awareness, just making our leadership aware of these opportunities to improve mobility through technology. This is what we will be using as we prioritize these projects. They're tied to the goals. So nothing really to tell you more about here. And some nuance, coordination with the active transportation plan. Taylor already mentioned that what they're looking at is making improvements near intersections for safety reasons. And there's an opportunity for us to work with them, and we have been working with them as they develop their plan. We want to use what they're learning as well as what we're learning to share. Low technology improvements, I already talked about the low tech versus high tech, and Mr. Campbell already highlighted that we're having a workshop for CAC on September the 27th at the Regional Traffic Management Center. Starts at 9:30, ends around 11:30, 12. But it's an opportunity to give our community advisory committee members opportunity to see what a RTMC or Traffic Management Center looks like. A lot of people are unaware that there is a central command or area where we are able to look at what's happening on the transportation network. Next steps, developing strategies and funding, the action plan, and then our master plan, which will roll into the next month. Madam Chairman, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. I know that Commissioner Delary had mentioned that the data from Seminole County is not accurate. I know in Orange County, there's been an effort for fiber and broadband. Are you keeping up with the most current, or how is that strategy? Is the data?
We are relying on staff to help us identify where
Our
that
staff or
your staff, because we do have a representative from your staff on our steering committee. So we're relying on that individual to help us understand that. So we will follow up with.
I'm not saying that ours is wrong, but I know that there's an effort going on tremendously and aggressively. So that's all I was asking.
And we recognize that when I made reference to, American rules football and audible, that's some of the stuff that we're going through this development.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Sure.
Yes, Commissioner Delary.
Thank you. Eric, I know data is important to TISMO. Do we own our own data that we're collecting? How do we do that?
It depends on, when you say Seminole County?
No, I'm talking about the information that you're collecting. Who owns it?
Well, it depends on who's collecting that.
Okay.
The jurisdiction's collecting it, goes to them. However, we are sharing that data as needed.
And then the next thing I know, that at some point, because of all this data, we did visit at one point miles traveled. At some point, we may need to go back into that at one point. And I think that at some point in the future, we need to be looking back at that again to see that vehicles miles traveled, how that's working. We opted not to go there because we believe it's a statewide issue, but data can also be very enlightening. And it'd be nice to know exactly how many of those vehicles are on the road, how that's actually being handled.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hill, seeing no other questions or comments, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to move on to see if we have any public comments right now registered for the general nature. Ms. Smith, if you can let me know if there's anything in person or online.
I have not received any in person and I do not see any hand raised online.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to board member comments. I'm sure many of you heard that Brightline has officially stated that September 22nd is their first ride on the tracks, but I didn't know if anybody else had any comments or. Yes, Commissioner Wilson.
It's a quick clerical thing, and I know that it's probably was already past the agenda from last month, has a 9 o'clock start time, but it was an 8 o'clock start time in the minutes.
Oh, okay. So Ms. Smith, our agenda from last month said 9 a.m. as opposed to 8 a.m. when we did come in. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Seeing no other board member comments, our next meeting is, I was gonna say Saturday, November 8th, but no, excuse me. Wednesday, November 8th at 9 a.m. Look forward to seeing you all. We are adjourned.